Welcome to Unstoppable at Craig, where we pull back the curtain on what makes healthy workplace cultures click and what happens when people are empowered to expand the boundaries of what is possible. We'll explore the perspectives of employees and leaders who have carte blanche to speak their truths, tell their stories, and unlock uncommon ways of approaching challenges. I am Dr. Jandel Allen Davis, CEO and President of Craig Hospital, a world-renowned rehabilitation hospital that exclusively specializes in the neurorehabilitation and research of patients with spinal cord and brain injury. Join me as we learn from people who love what they do and what happens when fear doesn't stifle innovation. There are people in our lives, and certainly I'll be selfish and say people in my life who I've looked up to for years and years, who view me as friend and colleague. And there are those moments, which we should be saying way more before the eulogy, that we have the opportunity just to say thank you and that it matters that I get to stand in your light. And today on our podcast, I have the opportunity to sit with and have a wonderful conversation with a friend and a mentor and someone who I admire, but who I also see eye to eye as a peer, Lauren Casteel, who is the CEO and president of the Women's Foundation of Colorado. And we're going to have a grand hour together. Who knows where this thing will go, but we've got a lot to talk about through the lens of both leadership and service is the way to put it. And one of the things that we talked about in prep for this was this little bit maybe repelling from the notion of leader or the mythical leader, which neither of us, I will proudly say, are. But it can be a really uncomfortable title to hold, whatever titles they put on us, because none of it ends up on our tombstones. It's really about the work we do. And I was thinking about the work that the Women's Foundation of Colorado does, and you're going to tell us a little bit about that in a minute. But I think it's one of those examples of that Margaret Mead phrase, that never doubt that a small group of concerned, caring citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And that part of this journey that we're on in leadership or in service is actually a constellation of several small things that we mostly have the ability to influence, not control. So I want to welcome you, Lauren, with that by way of introduction. I'd love for you just to talk a little bit to begin with about what is the work of the Women's Foundation of Colorado and why that sung to you personally.
Well, first and foremost, Jandel, I have to thank you for that incredible introduction, those opening words. And I just want to say back at you, sister friend. I think it's the mutuality of our relationship that we are able to, in the times that might be, the best of times or the worst of times, that we can be authentic with each other and transparent, that we can seek mutual support or guidance, ask questions, and get reflections. So I am profoundly grateful to have you in my life. I also have to say, and I know we'll talk about this later, was that I become very uncomfortable with, people talking about standing in my light or whatever, because I think leadership is far more complicated than that.
Amen.
Yeah, it's far more complicated. So I kind of repel from that a little bit. But let's talk about the Women's Foundation of Colorado. That's easy for me. I could not think of a way that I will come to the sort of, last stages of my career. I just turned 70. I've led 3 foundations over the years, been a senior at the Denver Foundation when you were on the board,
yes,
which is when we first met. And the Women's Foundation of Colorado really is the culmination of so many of the people that I've known, the values that I believe in. So we are the only community foundation, which means we are community funded in the state of Colorado, that is focused on gender, racial, and economic equity. We believe deeply in our vision that all women and girls in the state of Colorado should prosper. And we do that by, catalyzing community to advance and accelerate economic opportunities for Colorado women and their families. I have an incredible team and an incredible board. One thing that leaders should do is hire people who are smarter than they are.
Oh, man.
I know. And, who fill our gaps in some way or another. And certainly my team does that, whether it's in programs or communications or marketing or finance, whatever it may be. But we are all community builders and we're all fundraisers. And in terms of community, we use a variety of strategies. So there's our grant making. I'm thrilled to say that through what we call WINCOME, Women with Income Thrive, and therefore the state of Colorado thrives, we have granted more than $2.8 million in 3 years to 11 direct service organizations and 6 public policy partners. Our Women and Girls of Color Fund in 3 years has had more than 80 grantees, and we've given $1.8 million. Then we hold donor advised funds who also give millions of dollars through those funds as well. But that means that we're working on, much like Craig Hospital, at that deep individual level through direct service, nonprofits and partners. But we also work on systems change so that we can affect all 2.8 million women in the state of Colorado. It might be 2.85. Anyway, we're at least half of the population.
Well, what's really cool about that last statement you made is that you recognize through the work and the mission of the foundation that this is a grassroots and a grass tops, both structure that you've set up, but also approach that's going to be essential if we're really going to get sustained change.
Absolutely.
It's not just about direct services, which are critical, just to give people, in this case, women and girls, the opportunity to see beyond some of the more basic needs, to dream and to maybe step into some of their aspirational hopes for both their kids and women. But also, we got to be doing the systemic work at the same time.
The other thing that I'd like to highlight, trust for us is a key value, and we have many values, including learning and similarly belief in all women. And we have a direct cash assistance component of our WINCOME grant-making program where through our nonprofit partners, they work with their constituents and help to identify. Oftentimes it might be a car repair or even, as I'm thinking here, perhaps help with an adaptation, a woman with a disability that supports her ability to work. Or it could be housing. We're living in challenging economic times, there's no question, for many, many, many people around the country and around the world. But we also know that women of color in particular oftentimes are more vulnerable than others due to some of those systemic and historic barriers and policies that have existed.
Just as a reminder for those who are listening, the real beauty of being able to do this is that I have the opportunity to talk to people who, however they choose to wear the mantle, comfortably or uncomfortably, who are leaders doing great work in community. And what's really cool about what you just said is it's not done by one. You've referenced your fabulous team who absolutely we ought to all be surrounded by people who not just fill our gaps, but bring skills and things that we have no ability to even over a lifetime gain. That's why we're so much stronger when there's more of us together working towards a common goal. But the other is, you talked about other entities, other organizations, so that leveraging, that's about leverage, it seems to me, leveraging what the good you can do in the world, but also lifting up those other organizations to do their great work, whether it's in housing. That's a real important thing to remember. We don't have to do it all. Well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to out you on something.
Oh, no. Isn't that against the rules?
No,
out somebody without... Did I give you permission to do this?
No, you didn't, but I'm going to take it any old way. When we were doing our prep, you said that this whole idea of leader is an uncomfortable thing we own. And in fact, it's funny because this morning, I don't know why I was thinking about it while getting dressed, is about these titles. And I find myself saying, and I do say, I'm not, all that. I'm just Jandel, right? I'm only as good as the people around me. And what my job is to do is to make sure that we are creating the kind of environments as servant leaders, because I think I like serve better than lead anyway as a term, that allows them to bring their best, and in particular their discretionary effort, which we don't have nearly enough of being brought into the workplace these days, looking at any one of a number of surveys. And so one of the things we talked about in that sort of icky place of leader, I mean, the reality is that none of us are perfect as humans, let alone in these roles of servant leadership. And we talked a lot about this Brene Brown's seminal work, where she put this notion of vulnerability on the map in a big way with her TED Talk from a few years ago. And that vulnerability is actually a courageous act. I'd love to hear you just sort of riff on vulnerability from the perspective of your chair and what you do.
I am kind of a tender human, which doesn't always align with the notion of leadership. I remember a video a long time ago that I saw where someone at a concert goes out on the grass and starts dancing. And one can consider them to be the leader. But that movement didn't really begin until a second person began to dance. You know, if just one person were out there dancing on the grass, they just would have been one person dancing out there on the grass. Good on them. It's great. They're having a great time. But when the second person joined, then that's when the movement actually began. And that video also captures the vulnerability, I believe, of stepping out there in some way. And there's risk. There's risk that you could find yourself out there alone. And there's also the fact that one could continue to feel alone. I'm a crier. It can make people uncomfortable sometimes because I cry when I feel something deeply, whatever it may be. When there's some deep internal truth, it can be joy, it can be sadness, it can be excitement, it can be, a kernel of rage, it can be something that's just a deep truth. So I'm a crier. As a woman, that can be perceived as a fragility of some sort, and I try to check it, but it's there. It's definitely there. I think vulnerability to say, I don't know, I'm learning, how learning to be able to say, not only I messed up, I'm sorry. And I think this is a journey. But I messed up, I'm sorry, and this is why, and this is how. That can be really hard work to really look internally and to ask oneself, what did I miss? What didn't I hear? What was that? And that's not just those basic mistakes. Lord knows I have made many a mistake over my life. You try something and you go, yep, well, that didn't work.
What next? Yeah.
And in philanthropy, that's a part of what philanthropy is about, is that we are the nation's innovation tool.
Cool.
We are the nation's risk taker in some way. Our direct cash assistance is an innovation, and we're looking to move that into larger policy as well, but stepping out. So there are many instances where, an idea may or may not have come to fruition, but there's nothing lost in having given it a sincere try. But I think vulnerability is tough, and it's hard for us to have, the word safe spaces comes up a lot these days. Is it safe space? Is it brave space? Is it controlled space? I don't know. I wrestle with that, with all of those kinds of things.
I had a male mentor of mine who was a peer when I was still at Kaiser Permanente as an executive, who said, if you don't cry once a day, something's wrong. Something ought to be so cool from a joyous or a joyful perspective, or it brings you to your knees. It doesn't have to be all, God knows it can't be all those all in one day. Holy mountain, we'd be a mess by the end of the day. But if there isn't
come on, haven't you had a mess day?
Oh, I've had plenty of mess days, but not where I hope not going from joy to pain and all in between. But there's something so human about that, and it can make people uncomfortable. But you also mentioned admitting mistakes, but taking risks and trying things. And as you're talking, I thought, don't you think all that's liberating for the teams and the people around you?
It is, I think, in many, many ways. And sometimes it's, I don't know where this is going. I think that's the part that can be a little anxiety. It's one thing to come up with ideas that are innovative and you've got a process and a procedure and, research and tried and true techniques that support. It's another thing to just say, I have no idea, but this feels right. It feels right. It's been informed by informal outlets, intuition perhaps at some point, but oftentimes by community, by a conversation, sitting in community and sharing a meal with others and having them share deep truths and stories. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that our human experiences may or may not be that different. My daughter, whom you know, who's a painter, and she just did a painting, and it's of daffodils, yellow daffodils that were, coming up in her garden. And they're in this vase, and one or two of them are dying. They have begun to droop. They're turning dark. The others are standing still. And she calls it, the title of it is Grief. Spring. And we all have grief and we all have spring. Some of us have better opportunities to heal from the grief and resources and access, because it's about opportunities and resources and access and communities. Loneliness is something that has been permeating our communities, especially exacerbated by the pandemic, but I think also just by technology. The isolation that we feel. Maybe in the past 2 or 3 months, a couple of friends, both of whom happen to be women of color, one Black and one Latina, who are both community leaders, sat either at my dining room table where I had ordered food online. I don't cook. But I set a nice table.
Yay.
And cried, right? And cried from the weight. They're doing incredible work. That's one of the reasons why we have the Women and Girls of Color Fund. You use the word liberation. Liberatory leadership is about self-care. It's about supporting the leader. It's about helping them find whatever it may be. It can be a small, non-traditional yoga group. It can be therapy. I'm a firm believer in that as well. But we all have different tools.
The story you just told, we also need those places where we can let it all hang out. The safe spaces, the sacred spaces, however you want to call it, where we can cry. Because depending on the mission, the work that you're undertaking at any one point in time or in an epoch of time, it gets hard. And you don't have to have certainty. In fact, I'm reading this great book called Fluke. Premise is we control nothing, but we influence everything. And it's so hard sometimes, I think, to take that step back and just know I'm going to use a quilting. There's this beautiful tapestry or this beautiful fiber art quilt that I may be making. And that one little piece is but a piece that comes together to create this whole thing. And without it, it's less than. It would have been with it as I'm doing the work. And we're part of some big tapestry, I believe, that's being woven. And it's, to use the phrase, it's perfect imperfection without and without us being part of that. And so we're just sort of part of a big old story being told. And I sometimes feel like it's not my job to see the entire story, but just to, a lot of it is just showing up. I think that's what was said. I think somebody said that.
Show up, pay attention, tell the truth, and don't attach to outcomes. And letting go of outcomes. I'm really proud I identified outcomes, Public policy. I didn't mention that, thanks to our work in equal pay, the Equal Pay Act. Now the gender wage gap in Colorado is closing faster in the U.S. And so people have, $2,900 more women do within their pockets, and no one has suffered as a result of it, right? It's not a win-lose.
Right, it's win-win.
It's simply attaining that equality. But, the truth, sometimes finding the truth can be hard. So show up, pay attention. It's the truth of what you know in that moment.
In the moment.
In that moment. And
there is no certainty.
There isn't. And in a vulnerability, that adds an additional layer of, I don't know. And what will the outcome be? We can only give it our very, very best at that particular time and draw upon, the passion, the compassion, the humor, the style, the generosity, the kindness, the smarts of others.
Oh, I was so glad to hear you say that.
Oh, I am.
And the we in it, that we can only. And it's all those things. There's alchemy and all of that you just talked about.
Yeah,
that.
And a lot of it is a fluke.
Oh,
right?
Oh, yeah.
How many times have you said, I didn't see that coming?
Yeah.
Right? But I'm glad it did.
Or people will say, oh, thank you. It's like, I ain't do anything except connect the two of you. You all made the magic.
Yes, the magic.
You made the magic. And that's, I think, one of the, it's interesting, we talked about vulnerability, and I asked the question, isn't that liberating for those we serve? Because if you can do it, and in ways that we may not fully realize, we're giving others the permission to do it. But also in that you're giving yourself the permission to do it again and again. I'm going to just divulge something around how vulnerability plays out for me. And the teams know it. My pits sweat.
Is that why you always wear gorgeous jackets?
I go, whoa, what's going on under here? And I said that I was talking to one of our teams the other day about, and just sort of, I said, I'm going to let you all know, you all think I'm all that or what. I didn't quite say it that way, but however I said it, it was trying to respond to those moments that do make me look down because people give me way more credit than I deserve about how a thing comes out. And I just told them, I said, oh my God, my pits sweat when I talk like this, or when I really am going to put it all out there in a way that may just be even giving people, most of it's just heaping praise on people and gratitude and being excited about a thing.
Gratitude.
And we were on a Zoom, and the number of heads around the room that nodded was amazing. So all of a sudden, there's nothing unique. I guess this is a human thing that when really, and so that's one of those even signs that I know I'm in a really important place. Mm-hmm. And so with that, I'd love just to talk about how do you learn and grow? I mean, I think there's these really cool ways we repot ourselves over a life. I mean, who would have ever seen an OBGYN who wanted to be a doctor since a little kid sitting here in this amazing place serving this mission? So there's this repotting that happens over a career or a life, which I think is an important thing for younger people who probably show up in your office and want to know, how'd you do it? Can you mentor me? Those sorts of things. Talk a little bit about learning and growth.
Well, I've never had a 5-year plan or a master plan of any sort. And my dream as a child, my father's family, we used to spend summers in Kentucky with my grandparents. My dream was to be a jockey. People can't see me now, but for obvious reasons, by the time I was 8 or 10, I was a little too big to be a jockey.
A little tall.
Yeah, I'm a little tall for that. Yeah. But I've had many dreams. There's a film coming out about Shirley Chisholm at one time. I really wanted to be in Congress or something. And then I had to repot myself as a result of a series of traumas to be quite honest. A violent assault, 3, sequence deaths, all of that within an 18-month period as I was graduating high school. One of those losses was my father in a very dramatic and traumatic situation. But I went to college and I wasn't in either the right place or the right time, and I ultimately flunked out second semester my junior year. Swarthmore used very fancy language and said that I had been disenrolled. But if I ever were going to write a book, which I will not, I would title it Disenrolled. So I had to repot myself again. And in this moment in time where I felt as though I was sort of like slinking away, from a situation that I'd been unable to handle. We didn't talk about trauma in 1972 or mental health or depression. None of those words existed. I had, trying to find resources or support. So I repotted myself in Colorado. And thanks to a fluke, to use your word, I ended up at the University of Colorado, Denver, which revitalized me. And I was working at Channel 2 at the time and going to school at night. And someone said to me, Sharon Leventhal said to me, who started Colorado Woman magazine, they're looking for women and quote unquote minorities in that time to change the window dressing on the sets of television. I ended up getting a job thanks to Bev Martinez in television. And I started at the very bottom, ended up becoming a producer and an on-air host for several television shows, and then went from there, all community-based. And then I began to see my thread, my soul's code. It was really about community. I still love horses. I still wish I had a little time as a jockey. But even in wanting Congress, even in wanting going to CU Denver, I was looking for community. So I did these community-focused shows. And then I moved into the Pena administration. I repotted myself from television and found myself in community as a part of that new staff, that breakthrough of the first mayor of color, young mayor with the big vision. So those themes and values remain true, and it was through there that I met Swanee Hunt and started in philanthropy, which once again I knew absolutely nothing about. So in each of those positions, I was either a first or certainly an only as a Black woman, but also had the opportunity to bring in mentors like Renelle DeMuse and Bertha Lynn when I was Channel 6, and Bev Martinez had given me that opportunity, and Syl Morgan Smith. So, there are all these folks who believed in me more than I believed in myself and pushed me forward. And I would be, dragging my fingernails, on the floor, like trying not to go. The crazy things we tried and worked.
It's just amazing.
It's crazy. I started, Federico and I were talking about, I started the State of the City, and I made it up. And now no one cannot do it.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
What's fun, and if there's something to learn in that, as you were talking, I was thinking I had breakfast on Saturday morning with Dan Ritchie, who is just
one of our mutual loves
and one of the real leaders and pillars of this community. And then we took a walk, as is our thing, and looked at birds. And we talked about, I mentioned, you've repotted yourself so many times over a career. And in each one of those repottings, we're growing and we're learning, whether we may be the reluctant leader or maybe the reluctant new person at PBS, like, really, me? I can't tell you, including this job, how many times I've said, you want me to do that kind of thing? There may be some reluctance, not because you don't want to, but what can you bring? But we're a culmination, I believe, of all those experiences. And what's really cool about what you said is that through it, the one thread, that strong tie that bound you or binds you around the importance of community, I think it's an important thing for folks listening to figure out, what is that thing? why are you here? And then through the lens of why are you here, it kind of doesn't matter. Now, you can't do neurosurgery without going to medical school.
Yes.
Or, obstetrics and gynecology. There are some facts. It's not, there's nothing capricious about this, but I think that sometimes people think, well, there's this straight path in life. And life is, if I think, and I've told young folks, if you sort of think you're supposed to be over here, and I'm, for the listeners, I'm pointing to the right, and you're so focused on that star.
Our hands are just moving around all over the place.
That's right.
Yours are going.
That star that's over there. And you're so focused on that star that you miss the opportunities through just being present and just showing up and doing your best to amass the kind of skills that one day you look back and say, I don't know why I know how to do that, but I picked it up somewhere along the way. It's so important just to be present and not to be fearful of those opportunities for repotting, because exactly as you said it, I've said that so many times, there are people who could see stuff in me that I, to this day, can't see in myself.
Well, we did talk, and I'm going to throw this back at you a little bit earlier about joy.
Yeah.
And about Black joy, which some people consider, they'll be like, what does that mean? And I find myself thinking about lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony. Yes. Yeah. And, it's about the grief and the spring and how we as a people have survived because of our capacity to find joy or gratitude and to celebrate and to create, whether it's, jumping over a broom or music or dance, having the both and of the excruciating pain and the ancient tears of slavery has in fact been a huge contributor to our sitting here, you and me, right now in this moment.
It's nothing that I take for granted. I do believe that phrase, to those who much is given, much is expected. And I grew up in a family where, despite not a lot of money, my grandmother raised 6 kids alone. What I know of it, and why this is such a beautiful opportunity to talk about, whatever it is, as women, as African Americans, as people, we bring in service to organizations and community, that we need we need lots of diversity in terms of how we show up as leaders. But I think we're at a point in our history that as a world, as a people, as a species, that we need lots of different ways of approaching problems. And I think there's something about the ability of us, because of our unique history, to live in many sides of our heads at the same time that creates this thing called Black joy. And a couple weeks ago, I got a card from someone, a friend, a colleague in community, and I saw these words and I sent them to you because we talked about this notion of celebrating and promoting who we are and loving our history and recognizing that, we'll call it, you're 70, I'm 66. We were that first gen who were pioneers in some ways that paved ways for younger women, younger African American, younger people to see different paths that weren't nearly as hard, but will be hard in different ways. But this piece is just beautiful, and I wanted to read it. Remember, you were born from resilience, holding on to a shared history and carrying songs sung across generations of kitchen tables and church pews. Remember that presence and power passed down from all those who have come before us, reminding us there is nothing we can't be, dream, or do together. And I loved that. That's what those joyous moments look like for me. And a lot of them are silent. I don't run around saying life for me ain't been no crystal stair. To quote Langston Hughes, you just do what you do. But I think it's in those quiet moments. And I, every now and then I'll give myself a pat on the back at 2:30 in the morning. Well done. But the other thing I think that we bring, because of this, the unique nature of how we find ourselves in this place at this time, is akin to what we get to do here around adaptation and resilience. I mean, despite all odds. And it's something I think also about the human spirit in general, that we find ways to be joyful. I mean, it's hard to watch or see how Ramadan is being celebrated today, but it's being celebrated because it's part of who we are as a people, is that we don't wallow in sorrow, and we certainly don't here. You play the cards you were dealt, and you figure out how to adapt and how to rise up and how to move on and be resilient. Yeah, so I'm going to turn it back to you as we sort of wrap this thing up, because some of what's inherent in what I just talked about is this notion of loneliness and isolation. There are times where I've had to step in, step up, and say tough things, not just, sort of, I'm not talking about performance management, although, that could be it, but just to speak a truth to power or into power. And so I think that in those moments of loneliness, and I'd love for you to talk about it, and loneliness are just the quiet times, so isolation that we all have, we do have the opportunity to do some real reflecting. And Maya Angelou said, my mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive. And to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style.
Absolutely. That's my staff hears that all the time. And I think there's another part that says, and kindness, that comes after that. I think we also need to acknowledge those unseen leaders within Craig Hospital, within community, the women and the men who are doing the work every day. They inspire me the most, whether it's feeding their families, working 2 jobs, whether it's organizing, caregiving for others. There's so many myriads of ways that people are showing up for each other. But as you mentioned Ramadan, and in these times, this season of grief and spring, of Passover, of Easter, of Ramadan, when I feel sometimes, I don't know about you, but exhausted by the weight of the work, that happens too.
Yeah.
Exhausted by the weight of it and questioning, am I having the impact internally, externally, all of the above, all the people, all the folks, all the things. There's a both and to the loneliness. I am a flaming extrovert, right?
Yeah.
If you walking around this hospital, right, chitty-chatting. I don't know that I listen as much as I should because I'm like, ooh, that made me think of an ooh, in engaging with other people. But I've learned to seek more and more and more quiet time and to be more intentional about community and self-healing and grounding myself and where my energy goes. That's been a really important part because sometimes you can actually be lonely in a crowd, even though everybody's talking to you all the time.
Yes.
Right? And
you are speaking my language.
I know. That's right. You can be very lonely. There's the responsibility itself and those hard times. You and I both acknowledged anger is not our sweet spot. Having to step out into anything that feels remotely aggressive is not our sweet spot.
Correct.
We come from a place of humanity and healing and exchange, of conversation and in that Maya Angelou kind of way. And so the loneliness for me, I do a dance class. It's just me and my instructor. I've done this for 2.5 years. It's just us on the dance floor of La Rumba. It is cherished time for me. It is a very personal connection. It doesn't require any attachment on my part to technique. I'm not trying to do a showcase or compete. I just want to feel the music. We talk, we laugh. In that time, it's a very simple for me to get back in my movement like you in art. I've always grown up, being sort of a big awkward kid. Like I can play kickball like gangbusters. I could play soccer, but any sort of gentle gracefulness has never been associated with me. For that hour a week, I don't feel lonely. And then there's another small group that I'm a part of BIPOC and gender expansive women, a small group that does a number of healing techniques, including movement and food and sound and a variety of other things. It's a deeply personal. Most of them don't even know what I do, right? I don't wear makeup. My clothes, I could have picked up the same sweats for 3 nights in a row and put them on and go there. And that's a huge relief for me as well.
It's kind of cool. It's like one of the antidotes to the isolation and loneliness is self-nourishment. And self-nourishment comes in the quiet times as well as in the very much the two of us extroverted ways that we both live our lives and have to, in some cases, live our lives. The final thing I want to just point out, and then we'll wrap, is I love that you said the unspoken leaders. And I'd go so far as to say the unspoken heroes. I walk around this hospital. One of the things I do, it's a crazy discipline, but it is important to me, is I actually write an anniversary note to every employee sometime during the month of their anniversary. And it's not just, we have a little card we've made and it's got some words typed, but there's enough room that I fill it and some on these little postcards. It gives me the opportunity to see them, whether I have had, super personal up close connections to them as individuals, but I know their work. And I think about how their work, back to that tapestry that we're building, this grand tapestry that's been wrought over millennia, that I see how their work makes such a profound difference in the lives of those we serve and their colleagues and their team members. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's real leadership. It's not what I do. I'm overhead. That's what I say. I'm just overhead. It is they who are the people who I really sit in awe of, stand in awe of, and from a place of real humility, just love them. And they know I love them. That's what I say. And I think that's another thing that those team members who
and that's the meaning of philanthropy, is love of humankind.
I just love them.
To see that employee, to take that time. I believe, and I don't know if it's true, but that we can begin to create ripples that can counter this period of regress I'm feeling in the world. And so I just have a real appreciation. I met with, there was a tragedy in my family not long ago, and I met with someone who has provided some spiritual guidance to me, non-denominational. And he said to me that one of the things, and the repotting for me in my next phase, is going to be this sort of introspective quiet. So, and to hold my hands open to receive the gift and stillness. And he actually quoted something that I think is from the Hebrew tradition that translates into stillness, translates into these holding hands loosely so you can receive the gifts. So we've held on to a lot of things, right? I don't know about you, held on to a lot of stuff. And to now consider letting our hands be loose and receiving the gifts and then sharing the gifts. That adage about all things swinging back toward justice will prove true.
What a wonderful way to end our time, Lauren. Wow. I'm struck by a number of things that inform great cultures through the lens of servant leadership. The first is the diversity of it. There is no one way to do it. In fact, lately I've been saying about a few things. There may not be a ton of right ways to do a thing, but there are a lot of wrong ways to do it. But there's some themes in the right ways that then manifest and are played out in different ways. What I heard in Lauren's conversation and took away is, again, that concept of love of the work, love of community, love of those we serve, and interestingly, love of self, which is one of those things that I don't think we pay enough attention to. and really understand the impacts of not doing that caretaking in terms of how it then shows up in the workplace. The conversation about vulnerability, I heard once that, that's dancing as if no one's looking, which is a real wonderful skill for us, or trait for us, or characteristic for us to bring into work, because it enables and allows others to do the same dang thing. And that's how we grow even stronger organizations. I loved the conversation about repotting and hearing a little bit about her journey. And it goes to show and reinforces that there isn't a correct and only one path to wherever you're going. And it could be a path that ascends, it could be a path that descends, it could be a path that is actually fairly straight or flat, I should say. But nonetheless, that each and every one of those experiences, you have the opportunity to grow new skills that allow you to land where you are at a given time. And yet there is this need to figure out, and a desire, and I think important requirement to figure out what really drives you. And for her, it was that love of community that has been the thread and the tie that bound. Having the opportunity to talk about the unique experience of being Black, African American, however you choose to define it, in society and over generations, and what that has wrought in terms of a unique way that we, and unique things that we may bring to leadership. The ability to live in our heads at the same time and experience joy and pain, and through adversity to adapt and to manifest resilience like nothing you've ever seen. And then finally, the isolation and loneliness of leadership, that there's a way that can be interpreted as sad or hard, but that it's also essential that we do have those quiet moments. And I do think that's something that happens as we get into, I'm certainly feeling it in some ways, the later years of our opportunities to serve, is that it's real important to have that quiet, reflective time, and in those moments to self-nourish in whatever way that needs to come up. And it also should be something that is a wholesome discipline, that no matter your age or stage, that you make sure you got something that you can call your own, whether it's dancing or gardening or art or music or reading, but that is for you and you alone, because you come back to the work refreshed and renewed. I loved this notion of philanthropy as an innovation tool, and that they can take great risks, and in that are coming up with all sorts of innovative ways to approach some tough problems that we're all dealing with. So in any case, it was another really wonderful opportunity to sit down and have a great conversation with one of our community's amazing people. She doesn't want me to call her a leader, so I won't. Amazing people who are doing good work. I hope you took lots of notes, because I sure felt like, boy, was I immersed in, through story, lots of themes and opportunities to learn and grow. And so to the extent that this is helpful to you, I thank you for joining us today. I look forward to the next opportunity for us to visit over this Unstoppable at Craig. Thanks a lot. Until next time.